Hey there, everybody. It's AJ with Outdoors Podcast. And on this episode, joining me is Nicole from Dope Kitchen. You know her from TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and really everywhere that you consume social media. Nicole has an incredible channel on cooking while under the influence and has a real passion for backpacking and camping and hiking and doing all kinds of fun and healthy things in the outdoors to go along with her passion for food. So Nicole joined me. We talked about all kinds of backpacking trips where she got flooded out and fired out and rescued by helicopter. She had some incredible stories, so I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Let's get right into it. All right, Nicole, we are live. All right, so I want to start here. You mentioned in a piece of your content on Dope Kitchen, which is where I found you, and we'll get into talking about your channels a little bit more later, but I want to kind of dig right into your outdoor life. In your recent trip to kind of your first big outdoor musical festival, you mentioned that one of your favorite pieces or like most important pieces of gear that you brought was an eye mask. Helped you get sleep in like weird parts of the day when maybe it's more difficult. Do you bring an eye mask when you go backpacking or camping? And if not, have you thought about that before?
Most of the time, yes, but there are times when I won't use an eye mask when I'm backpacking or camping. And that's when, like, if I feel like I get enough rest, I want to be able to wake up with the sun and watch the sunrise. And if I'm wearing an eye mask, sometimes I wake up like an hour after the sunrise and I miss something beautiful. So, but I would say most of the time, especially when it's a pretty activity packed day, the following day I will wear my eye mask in the
Nice.
backcountry or camping. Yeah.
Nice. Are you a big, like, do you prioritize trying to get up for sunrise when you're out doing those types of activities? Or is it just like, hey, if I'm up, I'll go check it out?
It kind of depends. It depends on the scenery. On my recent trip to Colorado, we stay at a lot of KOAs, which are like campgrounds basically on the side of a highway, and it's not always the most beautiful scenery. So if there's nothing really to look at, then I will stay. I'll stay in and sleep as much as I can to prioritize getting a good night of rest. But if it's somewhere really beautiful, mostly when I'm backpacking, then I will get up early and watch the sunrise.
Nice, nice. That is one thing that I probably do not prioritize enough for some reason. I'm not exactly, I get up pretty early as it is, so it wouldn't be that difficult for me to be like, hey, let's set an alarm and make sure I'm up half an hour, 45 minutes earlier and get to enjoy that. For some reason, it's just not something I love watching sunsets. For some reason, I just haven't really, prioritized doing sunrises. I want to come back to your Colorado trip in a little bit, but I want to kind of ask a couple more questions first. When it comes to gear and the stuff that you do bring, do you have things that you really are like your favorite pieces of gear that you really enjoy makes you really happy and having on the trail? Or are you someone that's not as into the actual stuff and more just into kind of the journey, the hike and the campsites?
A little bit of both. I like to be as comfortable as possible, whether I'm backpacking or camping. So for camping, I have a really nice, like, two-person mattress. Um, I think it's from Xped, and it's like got memory foam in it. It's really easy to pump up. It's a little bulky, so um, it just takes up a lot of space in my car. But I love a good mattress, so I knew I wanted something really nice and really comfortable for car camping. And then for backpacking, a lot of people like to like religiously pack as little as possible and save on weight as much as possible. I am not that picky about that. I'm a pretty strong woman, so I don't mind carrying like over 40 pounds on my back. So I have two mattresses technically. I have my blow up air mattress, and I have one of those like foam accordion mattress type things. So I layer up with both of those, and my backpacking setup is pretty sweet. But other than that, I don't think there are any pieces of gear that I like must have on the trip, other than my mattress setup. I mean, I take a decent amount of cooking equipment with me when I'm car camping because I like to be a little bougie. I mean, I've posted a video a couple months ago when I was in Death Valley where I made homemade pasta when I was camping, and that was pretty dope.
Yeah.
So cooking equipment is usually pretty important for me. I have a really tiny stove for backpacking. I think it's from MSR Gear. And I have like a pot and pan set with some plates and mugs that are really, really lightweight, which I love taking with me. A lot of people use the jet boil. I've never used one before. I've always used the stuff from MSR Gear, and I prefer it. It's very lightweight. The stove is like pocket sized, and it's just really easy to carry around and super easy to use.
Yeah, for some reason I keep fighting it. I've got a buddy named Chef Corso that has got a whole channel. He's a classically trained chef that worked for like huge brands in, developmental kitchens and like was making recipes for huge companies, and then kind of took just like a wild left turn and turned his entire career towards cooking in the backcountry. And so now he makes his own like little pocket-sized trail cookbooks and has this whole channel. He's starting a TV. He just got picked up for a TV show, like total, like self-made success story. And he just basically tries to figure out how to make recipes that you can take into the backcountry and, make with real food, not a ton of ingredients, not making like elaborate setups, but still having like really fulfilling food. My wife and I just went on a backpacking trip for my 40th birthday, like a couple of weeks ago. And we made just an elevated ramen that he kind of gave us the recipe for, just adding like some soy sauce, some rice wine vinegar, some sesame oil, some sriracha, and then like some fresh vegetables, some dehydrated mushrooms, and some beef jerky. All of a sudden we had like a really legit meal versus just like a normal dehydrated meal. And it wasn't crazy weight to bring on like
Mm-hmm.
a couple mile hike, which is all we were doing because we've got an older dog that, couldn't cover a ton of miles. So he's got all these amazing recipes, not to like go on some, long Chef Corso, pump up thing, but he really kind of like turned me on to the idea of doing that kind of cooking. And so it's really cool to hear that other people kind of, take that same priority and enjoy the actual cooking process in the backcountry.
Yeah, I try to get a little bit bougie with meals, not just with car camping, but with backpacking as well. The very first backpacking trip I went on was to Jade Lake in Washington State, and it's a like 22-mile round trip hike. So you hike 11 miles into Jade Lake, camp there for a night or two. We only did one night and then hike back out. It was my first backpacking trip ever, so it was a long one for my
That's legit
first time.
miles for your first trip.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
very legit miles, very hard hike, but absolutely stunning. My friend who took me on the trip um, decided that we should make steak. So we froze some steaks and we took those in. So by the time we got to our campsite, they were perfectly thawed. And we made steak and Velveeta, and that was our backpacking dinner. And then we had some Kodiak cakes the next morning for breakfast. But we got real bougie for a one night backpacking trip because we needed to make it memorable. And steak and mac and cheese is like one of my favorite meals. So
For sure.
it was a great time. Yeah. But my another backpacking trip I went on in March, and this one is a crazy story. I can get into it now or save it for later if you
Yeah,
want.
go
But
for it. Go for it. Let's go for it.
I went to Hava Supai, and if you know Hava Supai, it's one of the most like iconic, beautiful, great American backpacking trips. It's pretty expensive to get permits because it's on Native American land. You pay them. It's not through like the national park system. So I scored a last minute permit to Hava Supai and decided to go like within a week of my permit starting, which was crazy. And it was during the really rainy season that we were getting in the Southwest here. So we were hitting Southern California with a shit ton of rain, but Arizona was also getting a ton of rain as well. So I drove out there. It took about 8 hours to get there, picked up my permit. It was going to rain a little bit the next day, and I just decided I don't want to hike in the rain. So I decided to delay my permit start date by a day, which meant that I would lose a day total. You're allowed to camp there for 3 nights, 4 days. So I ended up
Gotcha.
shortening my trip to 2 nights, 3 days. Um, I brought like homemade dehydrated backpacking meals. It was like the bougiest backpacking I've ever done. Sometimes, like if I'm kind of planning something last minute, I'll just go to REI and pick up some dehydrated meals. But this time I wanted to, like make some content and make some recipes of my own. So I get out there, I get a hotel for 2 nights and delay the start of my backpacking trip. And then I started my backpacking trip on this beautiful sunny day. And when I got into Hava Supai in the campground area, I set up my camp, noticed that the water was really brown. Like the waterfall is usually beautiful and turquoise. The creek is turquoise and like a really bright blue. And all of it was just kind of brown and muddy because of the rain from the day before. So I set up camp and I just decided to make myself a meal, read a book, and just hang out for the night. And the next morning, my plan was to just take a look at the water, see what color it was. And if it was back to bright turquoise, then I was going to go on a long, like 16-mile round trip hike to the confluence where the Hava Supai Creek meets the Colorado River. And when I woke up in the morning, the water was even more brown than the day before. So I was like, you know what? It's not worth going on that long of a hike if the water is just not very good looking, like it's not Instagrammable. So I'm probably not going to go
Right.
on the hike.
For the gram.
Yeah. So my plan was to just rest and relax. Like I was here on vacation. I was just trying to have a good time by myself. It was a solo trip. So I was just going to hang out in my hammock and read a book. But by like 8:15 a.m. that morning, someone approached my tent and said that a flash flood was coming in and I needed to pack up and go to higher ground. So I was a little confused. I didn't really know what that meant. When you hear about a flash flood, like in the movies, you kind of see water, like a shit ton of
Yeah.
water rushing through and just destroying everything within seconds. So that was kind of what I was expecting. But it wasn't that at all. Like the water level was rising fairly quickly, but it still took like several hours for it to get so high that it like destroyed all of camp. So I packed up my shit, went to higher ground, which was at the top of Hava Supai Falls, and the bridge to get back into Supai Village, which is how you will then exit the trail and like hike 10 miles back out to the parking lot. That bridge was totally washed over by water. So there was no escape and I was kind of stuck there, and I was sitting with like dozens of people just watching the water levels rise. And I was hoping that we'd be able to see the water go back down eventually so that we could cross the bridge. But then the water just kept getting more powerful and it washed out the bridge completely, and the bridge was broken underneath the water. So I started to internally panic a little bit, and I was like, okay, I do not want to camp here another night with these floods. Like, I got to find a way out of here. So I found a group of people who were being led out through this like backwards way up a wall. You had to like climb a rope to get out. And some people from Supai Village were leading them back to the village where they could either get like a helicopter ride out or just camp there for the night. So I was able to get out that way, and I was able to get on one of the last helicopters of the day to get back to the parking lot. And they do helicopter tours all the time, so it wasn't like
Gotcha.
a rescue situation. I had to pay. It was like a tourist thing. So,
Gotcha.
but it was the easiest $110 I've ever spent.
Absolutely.
And
Wow.
yeah, and then I got out of there and drove to my friend's place in Phoenix, and that was it. It was literally just one night of camping in Hava Supai. I didn't see any turquoise water, and I had to pay for a helicopter out of there. It was pretty gnarly.
You are the second person I've had on my podcast in not a truckload of episodes that has been helicoptered out of a harrowing backpacking or camping scenario.
Oh, wow.
That's wild. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was nuts.
Holy
And
cow.
that's not the first natural disaster that I've been through on a backpacking trip.
Okay, let's
are
hear
worse.
about the next one.
Okay, so let me take you back to Labor Day weekend of 2020.
Okay.
Where are you from, by the way? Where do you
So
live?
we're from Missouri, but my wife and I live in an RV, and we've been mobile for about a year now. So we
Oh, wow.
spent the entire winter on the Oregon coast. We're in Colorado. We went through Wyoming, Idaho, Oregon, like went through basically the entire Western United States, came down through California, and we're going to be here for the summer. And then who knows after that? We know we're going to be at least traveling for another year. And then we think some are probably settling on the Oregon coast, but we haven't made that decision. We've decided that we're going to still let other cities sway us from where we think we're going to fall. We're not going to completely make our mind up yet, but we've got a couple places in mind.
Amazing. Good for you. That's a dream of mine to just travel the country in an RV, and maybe someday I will do it, but I'm not quite ready for that yet.
I will
Uh,
say, going backward, like the couple things that I'll take away from it, and I want to get back to your story, but is everybody should do this. Like, it's an incredibly rewarding experience, and the younger that you can do it, the better. I don't claim to be young at all. I'm kind of like, into the middle age category. But it is one of those things that will open you up to so many places that you didn't know existed that were beautiful in our country. It's
mhm.
there. The amount of amazing landscapes in our country is incredible, and
Yeah.
they're in places that you didn't know existed.
Mhm.
I kind of use the term, there's connective tissue between all the big cities that most people go to that is just the best stuff that you'll ever come across. And then the second thing is, like, people are way more similar from place to place to place than you think. People don't seem to really be fighting like most of the, world would have you think they are. Like, most people are just trying to get along and have a good time. Uh, and they're way more like, helpful and friendly than you would think just about wherever you go. And then thirdly, it just gives us this huge list of places that we can go back to 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, see how they've changed, see how they haven't, revisit them. But we have this like huge Rolodex of places to camp, places to go see, places to fish, rivers to walk through, all that kind of stuff. That's just so cool. And then as I've seen my friends post on social media, whether they're taking their kids to Yellowstone or the Tetons or whatever, they go on a hike, and I'm like, I know right where they are. That's so cool. Because we've just been so many places. So it's been a hugely rewarding trip. And I would definitely encourage everybody to do it if they can, even if it's
That
in
is
like a
awesome.
van or a back of a Subaru, whatever you can do it in. We have a 30-year-old RV that cost like very little money, and we've been kind of like limping across the country, and it works just fine. Like, everything works just great. So
That's amazing.
do it whatever you got.
Yeah, I only started traveling internationally not even a year ago because I mean, it's mostly because it was way cheaper to travel within the US and because I love hiking so much that I love to be like doing road trips and just exploring on foot. But I totally agree with what you've said about how many beautiful landscapes there are in our own country that people forget about. Like, I've never really been a big city person, even though it's funny that I live in literally one of the biggest cities in the country. Um, but I love the outdoors for the solitude, and I love it for the different landscapes that you can see and walk around and literally live on the land as a backpacker or a camper. So this country is just so beautiful. So most of my 20s and even early 30s have been spent just traveling around the US by car and foot, through hiking. And there's just so much to see in the US that I think we forget about because we only really think about the cities that we are able to travel to or the international destinations, but there's so much to see here.
Yeah,
Um,
literally one of my questions was, you live in one of the most diverse, incredible, entertaining cities on the planet. What inspires you to go out into the woods when there's so much in your backyard that, you have access to all kinds of ways of filling your time? And you just kind of
yeah.
already answered that. So that's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's great here for the amount of people that I can be connected to, the amount of things that I can do in the city when I need something fun to do on like a typical weeknight. But, on the weekends, or like maybe once a month or so. I need to get out and I need to be part of nature. And I live in a beach town too, so I get access to the beach and I feel a little bit of peace and solitude in my own neighborhood, which is really nice. But I'm a very introverted person, so being around people all the time is very exhausting. Even if I'm alone in a city, there's just so much happening around me here in Los Angeles that I just get exhausted by the hustle and bustle of the fast-paced lifestyle here. And being able to have immediate access to the beach and really easy access to the mountains is what keeps me here in Southern California. There's so much to do that's only a couple hours driving from Los Angeles. And the mountains are amazing in California. So it's hard for me to leave LA because I just have such easy access to everything around. Um, but that leads me to my story because the Eastern Sierra of California, that area is one of the most beautiful places in the state, I think. And I went backpacking there Labor Day weekend of 2020. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a place called Big Pine Lakes, but it's a pretty well known hiking and backpacking spot along the Eastern Sierra mountain range. And I had been wanting to go backpacking there for a really long time. So I got permits for a friend and I for Labor Day weekend. And during that time of year, like early September, is when things really start to heat up in Southern California or California in general. It's just super hot, like really high fire danger. Like you really need to pay attention to hydrating and all of that because it gets ridiculously hot, especially in the like low desert lands. So we drive up there. We get to Lone Pine, California first, which is about an hour south of Big Pine Lakes. And we camped there for the night and just spent a little bit of time in town. And I think it was around 109 degrees that day. So definitely a big warning for potential fire danger.
Yeah.
So then the next morning we drive up to Big Pine. We start our hike. It is absolutely beautiful. We pick a spot by one of the most serene lakes in that area and had a really great night of camping. The sky was pretty clear, like nothing seemed to be going wrong yet. On day 2, the plan originally was to go hiking to a glacier that's in that area. But as we started hiking up there, the sky started to get a bit like hazy and we could tell that it was from smoke. So
Yeah.
we decided not to go all the way to the glacier because the glacier was at maybe a little over 12,000 feet. And at high elevation, I didn't want to be breathing in smoky air. So we just did a casual hike to a bunch of the other lakes in the area, got back to our campsite and went to bed. And then we were woken up at around 1:45 in the morning to the sound of someone screaming, "Fire, evacuate." So we popped out of our tent. I tried calling back to the person who screamed that just to see if they were still around and if I could get any more information about what was happening. I didn't hear anyone. So my
Oh
friend and
my
I just
God.
looked at each other half asleep and we were like, what do we do? And I said, we pack the fuck up and we get out of here.
Yeah. You don't take that
So
chance.
yeah, we packed up in like 10 minutes flat. I'm pretty sure we left behind a little bit of garbage, which I still feel bad about, but it was almost 2 a.m. at that point. Like, what was I going to do?
Yeah.
And we ran down the mountain as fast as we could. It was about a 4.5-mile hike out to get back to our car. And we got in the car, drove a little bit until we got service again. And then we were looking it up to see like where the fire was on like a map. And it was probably around 70 miles away from us. But while we were hiking out, we had our headlamps on and the light was just shining on all of the ash that was falling right in front of our faces. Like it was pretty thick smoke, definitely dangerous to be breathing in for a long period of time.
Holy cow.
And if we had waited until the morning to hike out, it probably would have been a lot worse. But we were just like trying to keep our eye on the prize of getting back to the car and just going as fast as we could without potentially
Wow.
injuring ourselves. And we got back to the car and just breathed this huge sigh of relief, and just started driving home. So I think we got back to my car around 4 a.m. and just kept driving, and nothing was even open at that point for us to like get breakfast or anything. So we didn't even make it to a McDonald's until we got back to maybe like an hour and a half outside of LA. But
Oh, that's
um,
rough.
yeah, it was a really gnarly experience, and that led to a little bit of PTSD for both my friend and I. But
Yeah,
it was
I
okay.
was, I was telling a friend who just like recently got into kind of like car camping, and then I think will kind of like ease their way into backpacking. He's really into fly fishing and stuff like that. And I was telling him that, out of all the camping I've ever had, I've probably only had like a couple of bailouts. And I mean, out of like 100+ nights in the woods, backpacking, car camping, doing all these different things, and you exclude like our year's adventure this year, pre that, I was like, I've probably had 2 or 3 nights go bad. So you'll be fine. Like, the ratio, the chances of you having like a bad experience are pretty low. It sounds like your ratio isn't that good. It
No, it's
sounds
not. It's
like
not.
you've got
This isn't
a
even one of
pretty
my
bad
worst stories,
record.
too. It gets worse. so, so there was
So
big
before,
pine. Hold. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So before you move forward, you mentioned a couple of things in your last kind of story, or pre your last story, that I wanted to kind of touch on, because I know from watching your channel, you have spent a lot of time living at the beach, like prioritizing dipping in the water, getting like a full body immersion in the water. One of my better friends from high school lived in Oceanside, just south of you, for a number of years, and was on the water. And every time I went out there, we did the same thing. Like, got to get in the water every day above your head, sit in it for a few minutes, like get accustomed to it. And he always said, like, dude, better than a cup of coffee, right? And I was like, yeah, way better than a cup of coffee. So I totally get why you do it. Like, what has that meant for you, and why is it so important for you to do it?
Well, at the start of this year, I was just kind of feeling sick of being depressed. I've struggled with depression for my entire adult life, and it just got to a point this past year where I was just so sick of being sad, and not really understanding how to get through it. So I decided to overhaul a lot of my habits and change a lot of aspects of my life. A lot of that started with, like getting to bed at a certain time every night, getting like 8 hours of sleep every day, and waking up at the same time every morning. I was reading at night before bed. I was eating healthier, making sure I was working out, like all of those little habit changes. I just made sure to stick with them. And I had always heard about the benefits of cold plunge and cold exposure, but I hadn't really like gotten into it yet. Like at one of the old gyms that I used to go to, they have like an ice bath and sauna, so you could like go back and forth between the cold and hot exposure. And I always thought that was just like something people did for like training recovery, because I've always been really into powerlifting and weightlifting and strength sports. But I'd never really paid attention to what the mental health benefits would be. So I started looking into it a little bit more, and I just realized I needed something to do that was manageable enough for me. So just once a week, jumping in the cold ocean. I just needed something to do that was manageable enough for me to like try to see some small improvements in my mental health. And it became something that I just really looked forward to. Like it woke me up immediately. I had friends start coming with me. It was like my time alone on the beach. It was just so nice to be there at sunrise, to watch the sunrise over my beautiful neighborhood, and to be outside before most other people even got out of bed. It just started to give me confidence, and it started to make me feel just really excited to get to the next cold plunge every week. So I was just excited to have something to look forward to. And it really has helped improve my anxiety and my depression. And it's something that I look forward to doing when the weather cools off again. Because right now, if I go in the ocean, it's pretty warm. It's not really considered a cold plunge anymore, but I still love being in the ocean. So it's still beneficial now. But I just absolutely love the ocean, and I love what cold exposure has done to me. It's just given me something to look forward to and has really helped with my mental health.
Yeah, it was really funny the last time that we went out, or maybe one of the first times that we went out there to visit, my wife and I told Bob, I was like, man, the first time we came out here, I didn't get in the ocean. I totally regret it. We got to do it. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. So we go down. We're just going for a walk that night out, to the pier that's there in Oceanside. And there's this big commotion at the end of the pier, and we see this guy climbing up the ladder. And I was like, oh, snap, somebody must have fallen off the pier. This is kind of interesting. So we kind of scurry down there. And what had actually happened is a guy had climbed down to release the hook from a juvenile great white that had been caught right off the pier. And they had a video of it. And this thing was, like a little mini Volkswagen that swam away. It was like 8.5, 10 feet long, huge. And I was like, oh, that's right here. We're quarter mile down that way that we're going to go swimming tomorrow. Right. And he was like, yeah, don't worry about it. They never bite anybody. And I was just like, oh God. And then I got over that fear and we start walking out into the water, and I'm kind of making a big to-do of it. I'm I'm stomping my feet. And he goes, no, man, you got to shuffle your feet. You got to kick up the stingrays. And I was like, what are we doing? Like, what? This is not worth the risk. And then we got out there, and completely worth the risk, completely. And the risk was completely, in my head. It's not a real thing. But yeah, I immediately was like, oh, I get why you want to live here. Like, I would do this every day, a couple of times a day, as not religion, but as a real routine habit. That would just become part of my routine. And it's incredible what it does for you. And, I played a little bit of football in college, and we were doing it for the recovery part, like you talked about, right? Just to get rid of the soreness. And I don't think any of us put the, numbers together of like what it was actually doing for us on top of that, and keeping us in good moods and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I totally get that. One of the other things that you kind of mentioned, grabbing permits and kind of, figuring out this trip that you wanted to go on. What does your trip planning process look like? Like, when you decide, all right, I got to get out of the city, I want to go do something. Is there a list in a journal somewhere of like places that you want to go? Do you just start Googling around? Like, what is your trip planning process to where all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're going there. We've got the permits. We're ready to go.
It depends on the place, because there are some places where you need to get permits at least like 6 months in advance. So at least a few years ago, I kind of started to compile a list of all of the really beautiful hikes within California or even Arizona, and other places around here that I wanted to go on. And I would look up how to get permits, or if permits are even required, and just start planning like a year ahead of time. So for Big Pine Lakes, that one required a permit that you would need to get 6 months in advance. So that one was a long planning process. But then other times, especially for camping trips or for other short hiking trips that might not require a permit or have much easier permits to get, I will plan those maybe a month in advance, maybe even less. So I used to have a huge list of California hikes and backpacking trips that I wanted to go on, and I'll just plan as far ahead of time as I need to. And now most of my trips are out of state or international, so my planning looks much, much different. But yeah, you just kind of need to do research on places you want to go and figure out what the process is, because you can't always book something at the last minute and go out there. It's not always possible.
I think that was one of the things that I really had to learn, coming from Missouri, coming from the Midwest. Pretty much everything that you want to do, at least in Missouri, is just available whenever you want to go. There's not enough traffic to prohibit, just open access. Excuse me. And then when we started, looking into national parks and going into Yosemite and Rocky Mountain and some of these other really cool places, you really do have to kind of get way ahead of the schedule, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year in advance. Sometimes it's in a lottery system. I mean, if you want to hike the John Muir Trail, good luck.
Hmm.
it's going to take a long time of applying and hopefully getting it. And then everybody's got to be ready to like pull the trigger and, take that big journey. And so, that's something that people really have to kind of get used to if you don't come from an environment where that's just the standard of like learning the permitting process, learning where to apply for those things. The national parks websites, I'm not blaming them, aren't like the easiest thing to navigate in the world. Sometimes the systems for booking permits or campsites is like pretty archaic and pretty hard to navigate. So for someone that's coming from outside of that world, it can be pretty tough to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of people who want to get into hiking or camping or backpacking, I would just say have a lot of patience because you can't always get what you want right away.
Yeah. I would also say, though, that there's always an accessible trip that's worth your time
Hmm.
that nobody else is going on. And if you reach out to rangers, if you go to like BLM ranger offices or Forest Service ranger offices, you'd be amazed at how much those people are just sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, waiting for someone that wants good advice to be like, oh my God, do I know the place to send you? Right. I mean, and that no one else goes to. We found a place in Yosemite. I won't name it by name because, I'll, if you guys want to message me offline or something like that, I'll let you know. But, everybody goes to Tunnel View, and it's the, place where everybody takes photos of Yosemite. There's a view like a mile and a half up the road that nobody goes to, where you can sit by yourself and just stare at Yosemite Valley completely, on your own for hours if you want to. And we have some
Hmm.
incredible photos from there of just my wife and I like hanging out, sitting on a ledge, not a person in sight, not a voice, nobody. And it's just like, oh, you just got to go around this corner and there's nobody there. And very few people know to go there. But if you just ask the right people, boom, it can really open up a world. So if you don't get exactly the trip or the trail that you were hoping for, don't let it close you off from like going out and adventuring and finding something that's, equally beautiful or similarly beautiful.
Hmm. Totally agree. Yeah, there's always a way to
Yeah,
experience
there's always a way. There's always a way. So you mentioned a little bit earlier you had this Colorado kind of group trip that you went on that you've posted a little bit about. I know you've probably got content down the road that's going to come out about this and stuff like that. So share what you will. How did that trip come about, and what was kind of your experience in doing something like that?
Yeah, so I started hosting trips last summer. I just saw another content creator who was posting about going on a trip with her followers, and I was really curious about it. So I found the company that she used to host trips, and it's a company called Trova Trip. So I had found a survey link on their website that a content creator could use to like figure out where their audience wants to go on a trip together. And I just surveyed my audience, got a bunch of responses. Someone from Trova Trip then reached out to me about planning something, and I started planning my first couple of trips last year. So we started with Yellowstone last year, and that was my very first hosted camping trip. And I had no idea what to expect at all. I was actually really anxious and really nervous about going on the trip because I was just scared. You don't know what kind of people are going to actually sign up for these things. You don't know if they're all going to get along or if they're all going to like me. I mean, I am one person on the internet. Like I am a certain way on the internet, but I don't share my entire self online. So there's always the fear that people aren't going to actually like me in person after what they've gotten to know online. So it was just a lot of anxiety going into the trip. But then when I got there, it was the most incredible experience of my life. There were 12 girls on that trip, and they all got along so well. I love every single one of them, and it was just the most perfect mix of personalities, the most perfect mix of like experiences as well. There were some people who were seasoned campers and outdoors women, and some people were brand new to camping. So we got to kind of teach each other things and learn from each other. And it was just such an incredibly supportive, kind, nurturing group of women. And I couldn't have asked for a better experience. So, from there, I just kind of decided that I wanted to keep hosting trips, especially domestic camping trips. I think those are really fun. The activities are always like really great and pretty relaxing. And it's just nice to be reminded that like America is a really beautiful place and there are some
Yeah.
wonderful places to see within our own country. So for when I started planning trips for this year, I chose Colorado and Alaska for my domestic camping trip. So I'm actually going to Alaska next week. So by the time this podcast episode launches, I
Sick.
will have gotten back from Alaska. I'm really, really excited about it. But I have hosted one international trip to Nepal, and I can tell you some stories from that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to Patagonia with a group of women later this year. So basically, my philosophy with my own social media channel in general is that like I started as a cannabis cooking show where I just get stoned and I cook, but what I noticed about other cannabis creators online is that they were just kind of leaning way too heavily in the like stoner stereotype where you're smoking like huge bong rips multiple times a day, like you're constantly stoned, and that's just not me. And I know that's not how most people who are casual consumers of cannabis consume. So I just wanted to share a lot more of my life to kind of show people that like yes, I can be a stoner, I can be a cannabis consumer, whatever you want to call me, but I am so much more than that. And you can have such a well rounded life while still being a cannabis consumer. You can be smart, you can be successful, you can be the opposite of lazy, like super active, really fit, strong. You can pay attention to your mental health. Like that's why I talk about so many other things outside of just cannabis and food, because you can be a stoner, but also be a hiker or a power lifter or a chef or whatever else. So I got into hosting these trips because I wanted to bring more like-minded women together who were also like casual consumers of cannabis, but also wanted to experience life together with a bunch of other like-minded women. Um, so that's just been a really life-changing part of this journey as a content creator, is just being able to host these wonderful trips with some amazing women. And I'll tell you the Nepal story. I took a group of girls to Nepal, and that was a really wild trip. That was actually my first time out of the country. Very wild to choose Nepal as my first
Yeah.
international destination. But it was up there on the list of places that people wanted to go when I sent out a survey. So I figured, fuck it, let's do it. It's like affordable enough. The flights were, of course, pretty expensive, but the trip itself was not terribly expensive. So I just decided it would be really fun to go, and we created this trip to go to Annapurna Base Camp. So it was 5 days of trekking through the Himalayas to get to Annapurna Base Camp and back. It started off like pretty crazy. The travel was incredibly long. It took me, I think, 30 hours to get there. I had an 11-hour layover in Singapore, which is a really cool airport, by the way. If you've
Yeah.
never
Yeah.
flown through there, it's pretty dope. So I got to Nepal. We landed in Kathmandu, spent like a night or two in the city, and just explored a little bit. It's a really like cool city, but it's so different from anything I've ever experienced in the US. So it was wild to go to the other side of the world and see what it was like to live there. It was really eye opening for me. So I was incredibly jet lagged. We had this 13-hour drive into the mountains from Kathmandu, which was absolutely exhausting. And I was so delusional by the end of that drive. I just couldn't help but laugh,
I bet.
like,
I bet.
and there were some really scary parts of the drive too, because we were in this like old beat up bus that was taking us through the mountains where there are no paved roads. We're driving over rocks that have water flowing like tiny rivers through them, and there were I have a video on my phone of me just cracking up because I thought I was going to die. I thought the
What
bus was
else
going
can you
to
do?
over the mountain. Like, what can you do but laugh, you know?
Yeah.
So it was a wild 13-hour trip to get there. Our bus got stuck at one point that we had to hike the rest of the way to our first little like mountain village where we were staying on the first night. It was really gnarly. The first couple of days of the trek were really hard, like way harder than I expected them to be. We were hiking for between 7 to 9 hours a day. The trail was it was mostly stairs. Like there are villages built into the mountains where people live, and those people who live there have to hike down the mountain into the city to get food and supplies and everything they need, and they hike back into their village. So it was wild to see these people who are carrying like 100 pounds in a basket strapped to their back, and they're wearing flip-flops, and they're going faster than me up the mountain. It was just absolutely wild to see. And meanwhile, all of us like Americans were struggling and breathing heavy.
It
And we
really
have half
gives you
that rate.
great exposure to the way that other people live, the fact that like, and don't get me wrong, there's lots of things that we can work on in our country, and there's lots of reasons to be in, upset and upheaval, but like that kind of exposure to the way that other cultures live, the way that they get by, and the happiness that they can find in that existence is pretty incredible. And it really
Yeah.
makes you a more well-rounded person having seen it, and it gives you a lot more empathy for a much larger group of people just from that exposure. So that's so cool that you got to do that. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, I came home from that trip just feeling very grateful for everything that I have and the life that I get to live here. But so the first day was pretty hard. The second day, the terrain was much more forgiving, but there were things that I picked up on that I noticed. Like there were a ton of livestock that, of course, help get supplies in and out of each village or between villages. So there was just a ton of livestock poop all over the trail. So you're kind of like dodging that and breathing in a lot of curious smells. And another thing that they tend to do there is they burn a lot of their garbage. So I was breathing in a lot of that too. Like I almost had the expectation that I'd be going into the mountains and being able to breathe like fresh mountain air, but that was not the case at all. Another thing that was
Interesting.
really, really surprising to me was that at each stop that we made, whether it was for lunch or sleeping overnight, there were a lot of people, especially Europeans, who smoked cigarettes. And they would like chain smoke them like at the end of their hiking day. And it was just wild to me. I'm not a cigarette smoker at all. I
Yeah, me
hate
neither.
cigarettes. And obviously they're so bad for your lungs. So it was just so wild to see people just taking a smoke break in the middle of hiking through the Himalayas. So that was really crazy. And then on the third day is the day that we reached Annapurna Base Camp. And when I got up there, Annapurna Base Camp is around 13,500 feet, maybe 500 feet short of reaching base camp. I started to feel a bit lightheaded, maybe a little delusional. Something just didn't feel right. And I think it was just because I hadn't been drinking enough water. I was definitely not hydrating as much as I should have been. And I just kind of felt like shit, but I just kept going. We got to base camp and I cried because it was so beautiful. And after maybe a couple of hours, I started to feel the effects of altitude sickness. And I've never had altitude sickness before. So I was kind of shocked at how uncomfortable the entire experience was. We were taking our oxygen levels. We had like a little monitor for our
Oh,
fingers,
smart.
and our guides had us take our oxygen levels at every stop, and everyone else was at a pretty normal level, even at high elevation at base camp. And my oxygen level dropped to somewhere in the like low 70s range, which is not good at all.
Right, right.
So I started to panic, but the thing that I do when I have anxiety is I completely mask it and I try not to show that I have anxiety.
That's healthy.
Yeah,
That's
it's
healthy.
very, very healthy. I just like didn't want to be a burden, you know.
Right.
But I also was just so scared. I was like, should I get a helicopter back down? Like I did
Wow.
purchased insurance for this trip because you were supposed to. So it would have been covered. It's not like a big expense that I was worried about. I was just freaking out because I was the host of this trip. Like I brought these people
Yeah.
together to go to Nepal, and I was the one who was suffering the most. So I was just really scared and didn't really know what to do. So
Rightfully
um,
so.
yeah, I tried eating and I could not even like chew the tiniest corner of a piece of bread. I couldn't really get much liquid down. I tried to drink as
Wow.
much tea and water as possible. I took Diamox, but it was just a little too late for that. Um, and I just tried to lay down and rest. And the girls who were sharing the room with me just told me the next morning that my breathing patterns were so irregular and really scary to listen to. So the next morning, I was able to at least drink a little bit of fruit juice. And I know that one way to relieve altitude sickness is to go back down to lower altitude. So we were hiking back down the mountain the next day anyway. So I figured it wouldn't be too long before I could get some relief. So we started hiking down, and then I started to develop this really gnarly cough. And it was raining that day, so it was already like this really somber like presence, and the vibe was much darker because I was sick and it was raining. So as we were hiking down, we made a pit stop at one point for like tea and snacks, and as we started to gather our stuff to keep hiking, I just had the worst coughing fit that I ended up throwing up. And I was just starting to once again freak out with a ton of anxiety. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was happening to my body. So later that night, when we got to our rest stop for the night, we had some Wi-Fi, and I was Googling like what happens if you have a cough after altitude sickness, and it's showing me things like really horrible like pulmonary infections and things that could literally kill you. So I'm starting to once again freak out. And I'm doing the whole WebMD thing and giving
Yeah.
myself a ton of anxiety. um so the final day, on the fifth day, it was a much shorter hike. I think it was only like 4 hours. But it was like straight down a huge set of stairs and then climbing up about 2,200 steps before we reached the top, where we would then go down a little bit more and then get a car back to the nearest city. And I just remember at the top of those 2,200 steps, we took a break at a tea house. I sat down and I put my head on a table and I just started sobbing. Like I could not handle it anymore. I was just freaking out and I felt like absolute shit. I had a fever at this point. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know what. So that night we got to this really nice resort. I took a shower. I rested as much as I could. I tried to eat more. I was kind of feeling a little better, but not really. I still had a fever and was very tired. The next day we took a flight back to Kathmandu. And when we got back to Kathmandu, I talked to the owner of the trekking company and I said, listen, something is wrong with me.
Yeah.
I keep feeling worse every day. I need a doctor. Like, is there a clinic nearby? And he was like, don't worry about it. I will get a doctor to come to the hotel. So a doctor showed up 30 minutes later. He took my temperature by putting his hands on my forehead and telling me I had a fever. So, I mean, it's not like the American healthcare system at all.
Incredible.
Um,
Incredible.
and he listened to my lungs and confirmed that there didn't seem to be any fluid in there. So he was like, you might just be allergic to the environment, and that's what you're experiencing. Like, you breathed in a lot of shit for the last few days. Even in the city of Kathmandu, like the cars had black exhaust coming out of it. So it just wasn't clean air. And I thought like, oh, this all sounds logical. I'm just allergic to this country. It's
Yeah.
fine. But I still felt like ass. And 2 days later, when I ended up back in LA, I took a COVID test and it was COVID. So I got altitude sickness and COVID at the same time.
Simultaneously. Incredible.
Yeah, it was
Incredible.
the worst travel experience of my life.
You had to go to the Himalayas to get COVID living in the biggest city in the country. That's incredible.
Yep.
That's
and that was my
amazing.
first time getting COVID.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. And, I've got one question that I reached out to a bunch of friends of mine. and said, "Hey, I'm going to have Nicole on the podcast. Do you guys have any questions?" And one of my friends reached out and was like, "Yeah, does she do any solo camping, backpacking? And if so, how do you make your friends comfortable with letting you go out by yourself into the woods, into the backcountry? Or is that not an issue with the particular group of friends that you have?"
Yeah, I do a lot of solo hiking. Especially now, I feel like I don't have a ton of friends who are into like the crazy big hikes that I go on. So I'm kind of on my own. And I will go camping alone once in a while, but now it's just more fun to do it with people. And I have gone backpacking on my own. Like Hava Supai was by myself. Um, so yeah, I love solo travel in general, even out in nature. But I always make my friends feel comfortable by at least picking some responsible friends for me to share all of my information with. So, like, I will share my location with them, like through my phone, and I will always share where I'm going to be parking, what trail I'm doing, when to expect to hear from me. I tell them if they don't hear from me by this time, don't panic just yet, but if they don't hear from me by this time, then maybe you should start to panic.
Yeah.
And I'll try to do as much like research for my friends as possible in terms of like numbers to call in case of an emergency and they don't hear from me. um I'll give them like my mom's cell phone number if they need to contact my mom for whatever reason. Like I just try to equip my friends with as much information as possible so that if something does happen and they don't hear from me past like the deadline, then they know who to call and who to alert.
Smart advice. I the nonprofit that I was mentioning before we started talking, is a cybersecurity nonprofit, and one of the guys that's kind of a top executive in cybersecurity said, if you're ever out in the woods and you're lost and you're on the last little bit of your cell phone data or your cell phone, battery, he goes, leave an outgoing voicemail message with the best information that you have on where you are. So if your phone dies and people start looking for you, what are they going to do? They're going to call your phone. Well, if your outgoing voicemail says, "Hey, I'm lost. Here's where I am. Come find me," there's a chance that the cavalry might start come looking for you and you've got a better chance of being found. I thought that was just like a great piece of advice to share. Hopefully it never gets to the point where your phone is dying and you're lost in the woods and you're going to have people come get you. But, that's all great advice in sharing with your friends so that they can feel more confident.
Mm-hmm.
Nicole, before I let you go, obviously, you've got a huge social media following across, TikTok and Instagram and Threads and YouTube and all of these other channels. By the way, I'm your 6th Twitter follower. That's
Oh,
going to be
hell
my
yeah.
claim to fame. So I am going to be one of the people that really launched you on Twitter. That's going to be my big
Well,
launching
now it's
point.
called X, I think. I don't know
Yeah,
what
I think they're
Elon Musk
changing
is
it.
doing to that app. It's going to go away at some point. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know.
gonna fall off. It's bound to. But tell people how they can find you and what you share on your channel so that they can go follow you as well and fall in love with your content like I have.
Sure. I am Dope Kitchen everywhere, but with a variety of underscores. So on Instagram, it's dope underscore kitchen. On TikTok, it's dope underscore kitchen. On YouTube, it's dope kitchen. On Facebook, it's Dope Kitchen. I didn't even realize people were still using Facebook, but I've grown to almost 500,000 people in 6 months. It's really
Wild,
wild. So
wild.
go check me out there, I guess.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
I'm on Threads because I hopped on when everyone hopped on, but I don't really open the app anymore, so
Same
whatever.
exact way. Same.
Yeah. And then I only got a Twitter like 2 weeks ago because apparently one of my videos went mega viral that someone shared on Twitter. So whatever.
Awesome.
Don't even follow me there. I'm not going to
Yeah,
post on Twitter.
yeah.
But if for in general, the things that I post, I get stoned and I cook. That's the bread and butter of what I do. But then I share a lot of like mental health type of inspiration, like my cold plunges and giving up coffee and just other lifestyle and travel type of things, and lots of hiking content whenever I go on fun trips. So if you're into all that, follow me there.
Yeah, and I will say, Nicole, what really drew me to your channel, obviously your recipes and all the cooking and everything is really cool. The fact that you show a variety of components to your lifestyle, right? To the powerlifting in your background, to your outdoor pursuits, and to the things that you do in your travel pursuits, all those things, like the well-roundedness and the kind of versatility or diversity of your personality is just really, really interesting. And then on top of that, you've really created a really supportive community within your followers that really feel like it's a really safe place to share, what's going on in their lives, weird, kinks or whatever it may be, and all kinds of hilarious conversations that you've had. It's been a really cool place for people to feel like they have something to belong to, a community to be a part of. I know I feel really, grateful to be a part of it. So keep doing what you do because it's a really, really cool channel that you've cultivated.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
It's amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on Outdoors Podcast. It was so much fun to get to know you and to, hear your stories from the outdoors. You've got some really freaking fun stories. So thanks so
Yeah.
much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.